Prior to the Bitcoin ETF approval, many anticipated BTC to immediately skyrocket following the event. But after a little bit of a lackluster launch, we have to wonder, maybe everything is already priced in. Today we're going to be looking at whether everything is already priced in for Bitcoin. Now this is pretty much, as I explain it, the efficient market hypothesis, in that if we're all aware of upcoming events, surely we can invest based on that future fair valuation rather than wild speculation in the current based on emotion and biases and whatnot. But as you probably are already aware, this is definitely not true. If we look at something like the Fear and Greed Index, we can see that people are irrational at the least rational times. We can see extreme greed in the market at market peaks, and even more obvious, extreme fear in the market at the most opportune moments to actually accumulate. We can see where Bitcoin is at an incredible discount. This is usually where people are most willing to sell their coins, not invest anything, and ultimately it doesn't really make any sense. And I understand that following the ETF approval, many were anticipating on day one we'd potentially get a new green candle that'd send Bitcoin to 50, 60 plus $1,000 immediately due to all the institutional capital inflows. And because it didn't quite work out like that, many, especially on social media that I've seen, are wondering if Bitcoin, like we said, is priced in, because everyone almost knew that this was a certainty of approval, that before the event actually happened, price had pretty much reached the price of fair value, and then following it, nothing really happened. So people often refer to this as a buy the rumor, sell the news event. All the hype building up to it usually is what drives price, and then usually the event itself is a little bit of a disappointment. But if we just look to the Bitcoin price currently, we can see, like we said, we've been chopping around a little bit sideways. But in a previous video, we looked at the comparisons of Bitcoin's ETF launch and the most comparable ETF launch, which was the gold launch in 2004. And if I just overlay that same price action from the video I made, we can see that following gold's ETF launch, there was multiple weeks, well, this is actually a scaled down time scale. So there was a long period of time where price just stayed sideways. Maybe it was a little bit of a run up prior to that. And then on launch, maybe it wasn't as immediate as everyone was anticipating. But following that, we can see after this sideways choppy consolidation, as soon as price really got going, it really got going. If we'd see anything even half as good as this in Bitcoin, I certainly wouldn't complain. So why are people maybe alluding to the fact that things are priced in? Because if we look at something like the realized cap hodl waves, we can see again that people aren't rational when it comes to their investments. We can see these increasing, these lower bands, and new capital coming into the space to buy Bitcoin again at the least opportune moments. Because even if people that have been in Bitcoin for a number of years and were active through the bear cycle were aware of this Bitcoin ETF, maybe we're anticipating the inflows, so maybe Bitcoin came to its fair valuation through that means, we can see that that didn't take into account potentially the new people that only heard about Bitcoin after the ETF was launched. This isn't taking into account new capital. So obviously there's not going to be an efficient market hypothesis, everything priced in, when there's a constant new stream of people coming in just finding out about this information. Especially if we look at something like the Bitcoin funding rates, which again shows that even people that are already in the space and active in the space usually are doing the absolute wrong thing all the time. We can see that when these funding rates spike to the downside, indicates that a vast majority of people are shorting the market. And we can see when are people shorting the market, pretty much at the bottom of the market. And when are people ultimately longing the market, these green funding rates, when people are paying extortionate fees just to be able to hold open long positions. Again, this is typically when the market is beginning to top out. So we can see there's really not any logic, there's not really anything backing this thought process that maybe everything is already priced in. To some extent, it may be, especially for fundamental events like this, which people can see coming potentially a few weeks or months in advance. But is the halving event priced in? As I film this, there's only a few months away from the halving event. And at that point, what we're going to see is the Bitcoin inflationary rate decrease 50%. We're going to see miner revenue decrease 50% in terms of block rewards at least. Is this already priced in? Because historically what we can see is following this fundamental event for Bitcoin, the inflationary rate decreasing by 50%, we see an exponential run up in price action. So why can't we buy in anticipation of this? Why isn't Bitcoin's price considerably higher already? How far ahead are we assuming that things are priced in? Are we assuming 10 years from now when Bitcoin's inflation rate is a fraction of a percent? Who knows what the logic is behind this thinking? All we can really say for certain is on a longer horizon, on a longer term basis, these little pullbacks in the market, these overreactions, these emotions, these personal biases, they don't really matter. If we just zoom out, we can see that if you'd have bought Bitcoin through 93.2% of its history and held till today, you'd currently be in a profitable position. That's a pretty impressive stat, really. And I think it really tells that, especially when looking at the more short-term metrics, the funding rates, the open interest, and we can see how unprofitable a lot of people are acting on emotion, like we can see in the fear and greed index. If we take a step back, look at some really macro overview charts, it becomes much simpler. Something like the net unrealized profit and loss. We can see when most people are at a loss, this is the most opportune moment. When there's capitulation and fear in the market, this is the time to be accumulating more. And once there is euphoria and greed, that's usually not a bad spot to be able to take some profits, start distributing your coins. So maybe there isn't anything priced in. Maybe this is just investor emotion, because historically we don't really see any sustained evidence that this is true. Also, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to ensure you're receiving all of our content as soon as it's released. Make sure to check out all the resources that we've discussed today, as well as the many more that are all available on lookintobitcoin.com, your number one source for Bitcoin information. So just to summarize, after an ETF approval that left many a little underwhelmed with Bitcoin's price action, we have to wonder if events like this are priced in ahead of schedule. So if everyone is aware of an upcoming event, surely everyone would take the most obvious course of action for their investing. Well, like we saw from multiple different examples, historically this has not been the case, and investor emotional irrationality has almost always exceeded logic. And to be honest, I think we are all slightly guilty of that, or at least have been in the past. And even still, even in an efficient market where all current participants are aware and price naturally finds a fair value, we have to consider market participants that aren't even involved in the markets yet. Like we saw with the R-HODL ratio, people coming into the market, into the Bitcoin and crypto space for the first time aren't going to be too worried about what the fair valuation is going to be. They're going to see the exponential gains to the upside and assume that that's going to continue. Obviously, it typically doesn't continue for too much longer, but really the only thing we can predict is unpredictability in the markets, and trying to assume everything is priced in is probably doing your investing a lot more harm than good. If you like this video, then please visit lookintobitcoin.com, where you can also consider becoming a site subscriber to gain access to professional resolution charts, advanced macro and portfolio data tools, in-depth crypto industry reports, live and personalized indicator alerts, private TradingView scripts, and more, all for a fraction of the standard industry price. And let me know what your thoughts are on future events potentially being already priced in. Do you think this is the case, or do you think irrationality, emotion, bias trumps logic pretty much every time? As I said, let me know. I look forward to reading and replying to all of them. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.